The morning they read Daniel's will, a lawyer slid a piece of paper across a big wooden desk and looked at me like he felt sorry for me. And I remember thinking, why is he looking at me like that? I'm his wife. I'm supposed to be here. Then he said the words that broke something inside me that I don't think has fully healed since. He said, "Miss Carter, not Mrs. I'm afraid you have no legal standing in this estate." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "There is no record of a legal marriage between you and Daniel Whitfield. None. Not in this county, not in this state. I'm sorry." 8 years. 8 years of cooking his meals, paying his bills, holding his hand at every doctor's appointment, loving his family even when they didn't love me back. And apparently, none of it was legal. I sat in that chair and I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was tilting. And then the lawyer said one more thing, quietly, almost carefully. He said, "Mr. Whitfield's legal wife, Diana Whitfield, has already filed the estate claim." His legal wife. I want you to really let that land for a second, because I had no idea Diana Whitfield existed, not until the day we buried him. Let me take you back to when I thought I had found the love of my life. My name is Claire Carter. I'm from a small town in Ohio, grew up pretty normal, middle-class family, 2 parents who actually stayed together, a younger brother named Tyler who still calls me every Sunday. I put myself through college, got my accounting degree, moved to Columbus, and built a quiet, steady life. I had my own apartment, my own car, my own savings account. I wasn't rich, but I was proud. Everything I had, I earned. I was 30 years old when I met Daniel Whitfield. It was at a dinner party at my friend Melissa's house. He walked in wearing a navy blazer, holding a bottle of good wine, and he had this confidence about him that wasn't arrogant. It was just calm, settled, like a man who knew exactly who he was. He was an architect, 41, handsome in that older, experienced way, salt and pepper at the temples, laugh lines around his eyes. We talked for 3 hours that night, just the 2 of us, in the corner of Melissa's living room while the party went on around us. He was funny and thoughtful, and he listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. He called me the next morning. He sent flowers to my office the following Tuesday. He planned our second date at a nice restaurant I'd always wanted to try, but never had a reason to go to alone. Within 4 months, he told me he was falling in love with me. Now, looking back, I can see the things I chose not to see. When he introduced me to his friends, I was always Claire, never my girlfriend, just Claire. He said he hated labels. I thought that was modern and open-minded. I was wrong. The first time I met his mother, Margaret Whitfield, she looked at me the way you look at a stain on a white carpet, polite enough to not say anything, cold enough to make sure you felt it. She called me Daniel's friend for 3 years. I told myself she just needed time to warm up. She never did. 14 months after we met, Daniel suggested we move in together. He'd found a house, a nice one, 3 bedrooms, good neighborhood on the east side of Columbus. He said he wanted us to build something real. "Let's make it official," he said. "Let's build a life." I said yes. Of course I said yes. I was in love. The mortgage was going to be tight on his income alone, so we applied together. My credit score was better than his, significantly better as it turned out. The loan went through because of me. But when the paperwork came back, only his name was on the deed. He said it was a clerical issue. He'd fix it. He never fixed it. About 6 months later, Daniel said he wanted to have a small ceremony. Just us, just a few close people. He said he hated big weddings, hated the performance of it all. He said what mattered was the commitment, not the party. We had a ceremony in a friend's backyard on a Saturday afternoon in September. His friend Gary officiated. There were 6 people there, no official photographer, no marriage license that I signed, no paperwork at all. I wore a white sundress, I cried happy tears, I said my vows, and I genuinely believed, with my whole heart, that I was married. The first few years were good, really good. We had a routine, a home, a life together. I contributed half of everything: the mortgage payment, the groceries, the utility bills. I kept every receipt in a folder because that's just what accountants do. Old habit. But somewhere around year 4, things started shifting. Small things, the kind of things you explain away because you love someone and you don't want to believe the alternative. Margaret got colder. She stopped inviting us to family holidays together and started inviting Daniel separately, saying the gatherings were just immediate family. I was his wife, or I thought I was, and I wasn't immediate family. I asked Daniel to add me to the property deed. It had been 3 years. He said the attorney was backed up. Then he said he'd lost the attorney's number. Then he said we'd do it after the holidays. There was always a reason, always a next time. In year 5, I came home from work early on a Wednesday afternoon. Daniel was in the kitchen, on the phone, speaking quietly. When he heard the door open, he walked into the bedroom and closed it. I stood in the hallway and I heard him say 2 things clearly. "She doesn't know." And then a name. "Tell Marcus I'll call him this weekend." Marcus. I didn't know anyone named Marcus. 2 weeks later, I was hanging up one of Daniel's jackets and I felt something in the inside pocket. A birthday card. I opened it without thinking much about it. It said, "Happy birthday, Dad. Love, Marcus, age 12. I stood in that closet for a long time. When Daniel came home, I showed him the card. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I said, "Who is Marcus?" He looked at me, and his face went somewhere I'd never seen it go before. Hard, closed off, angry in a quiet, controlled way. He said, "That is none of your business, Claire." I said, "You have a child?" He said, "Don't do this. Don't go through my things and then stand there acting like I owe you an explanation for every part of my life that existed before you." He made me feel like I had done something wrong, and I was so shocked by the anger, because he'd never spoken to me that way, that I backed down. I put the card back in the jacket. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. In year 7, Daniel had a heart attack. Mild, the doctors said, but a warning. He was put on medication, told to change his diet, reduce stress. He came home from the hospital quieter than I'd ever seen him. I became his caretaker. I reduced my hours at work. I cooked every meal to his doctor's specifications. I drove him to every follow-up appointment. I managed his medications, and I paid every single bill, alone, for over a year. He never thanked me. Not once in that year did he say, "Claire, I don't know what I'd do without you." He just let me do it, like it was owed. I told myself that's how men like Daniel show love, quietly, practically, that he'd show gratitude when he felt better. He never felt better. He died on a Tuesday at 3 a.m. Cardiac arrest, sudden and final. I was holding his hand. The funeral was 3 days later. His mother arranged everything. I wasn't consulted on anything, not the flowers, not the music, not the readings. I told myself Margaret was grieving. I gave her space. I sat in the second row. The front row was for immediate family: Margaret, Daniel's sister Karen, and Karen's husband. There was one more person in the front row, a woman I had never seen before. She was my age, maybe a little older. Blonde hair, black dress. She was crying in a way that was very private and very real. After the service, in the reception hall, she walked up to me. She looked at me like she was trying to figure something out. Then she said, "I'm Diana Whitfield. I'm Daniel's wife." I said, "I'm sorry?" She said, "We were married 14 years ago. We have a son together. His name is Marcus." The room kept going around me. I heard voices. I heard the clink of glasses. I heard someone laugh across the room. I said, "That's not possible. I'm his wife." And the look she gave me, it wasn't cruel. It was something worse. It was pity. She said, "Honey, I don't think you are." Margaret appeared at my elbow before I could respond. She took my arm, led me to a corner of the room, and spoke to me in a low, flat voice, like she was telling me about a parking ticket. She said, "He told you what you needed to hear. I advised him for years that this would end badly. Please don't cause a scene at my son's funeral." That was it. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of 8 years. I drove home in a state I don't have a word for. Shock doesn't cover it. I sat at the kitchen table and I opened my laptop. I searched for our marriage record. Nothing. I called the county clerk's office. No marriage license had ever been filed. I called the state office. Same answer. Our ceremony, the backyard, the white sundress, Gary officiating, meant nothing. Legally, it had never happened. I had never been Daniel Whitfield's wife, not for a single day. And the house I was sitting in, the house I had helped buy, helped pay for, cleaned and painted and made into a home, was not mine. My sister Joanna was at my door within 40 minutes of my call. She didn't say a word when I opened the door. She just walked in, sat down on the floor next to me, and put her arm around me. I cried for a long time, not the pretty kind of crying, the kind that hurts your chest and makes you feel hollow when it's done. I said to her, 8 years, Joanna, 8 years of my life. She didn't try to fix it. She just said, I know. Later that night, I found a box under the bed. It had been pushed to the very back, behind some old boxes of files. I called it out. It was full of Daniel's personal notebooks. He'd kept journals for years. I knew that, always thought it was a private habit I respected. I opened one from year 3 of our relationship. He wrote about his life with Diana and Marcus in detailed, loving terms. He wrote about Marcus's school plays, Diana's garden, their family dog. Then he wrote about me. He called me convenient. He wrote that I was low maintenance and financially stable, and that our arrangement suited him well because I didn't push for things Diana would have pushed for. He used me, deliberately and knowingly. He used my income, my stability, my trust, and my love to fund a double life for 8 years. Joanna closed the notebook. She put her hand over mine. Then she said something I will never forget. She said, "Stop reading the words of a dead liar. Start thinking about what you're going to do about every person who knew and said nothing." I looked at her. I wiped my face, and I thought, I am an accountant. I have kept every receipt for 8 years. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Melissa, not coworkers, not even Tyler. I just started working. I found a family law attorney named Rachel Torres, sharp, direct, no sympathy in her voice when she talked business, which was exactly what I needed. I brought her a box of files. 8 years of mortgage statements, utility bills, joint bank transfers, grocery receipts, tax returns, and medical expense records. She went quiet for a long time after she looked through it. Then she said, "In Ohio, there is a legal concept called common law marriage. It's been abolished for new relationships, but the years and the documentation matter for financial claims. You were a mortgage co-borrower. Your name is on the original loan application. That gives you legal financial standing in this property, regardless of whether you're on the deed." She explained that because Daniel had fraudulently filed federal tax returns listing me as his spouse for 7 of the 8 years we lived together, he had created a paper trail that actually supported my claim while simultaneously exposing himself for tax fraud. Then she said, "There's something else you should know. Has anyone told you about his life insurance?" I said, "Diana's named on a policy, I know." Rachel said, "He had 2 policies. The second one, you're named on it. It was taken out 4 years ago and never updated. Because it's a beneficiary designation, it falls completely outside the estate. Diana cannot contest it." I sat very still for a moment. Then I said, "File everything." She filed a claim for financial recovery based on mortgage co-borrower fraud, documented financial contribution, and tax record evidence. She filed it quietly. No press, no drama. Diana's legal team got the notice and immediately scheduled an emergency hearing. They assumed I was a desperate woman with no ground to stand on. They had not seen my box of files. The hearing was on a gray Thursday morning in February. Diana's legal team was aggressive from the start. They called me a cohabitant with no legal relationship to the deceased. They said I had no standing. Rachel let them finish. Then she placed the original mortgage application on the table, my name right there as co-borrower. Without my credit score, the loan would never have been approved. The judge ordered an immediate review. Then Rachel placed the tax returns, 7 years of Daniel listing himself as married filing jointly, with my social security number as his spouse on federal documents. The room got very quiet. Diana's lead attorney looked at his client. Rachel said, "Mr. Whitfield committed federal tax fraud by filing a false marital status. These documents also serve to corroborate the nature of my client's relationship with the deceased, given that he himself represented her as his wife to the United States government." That was when Diana's attorney leaned over and whispered something to her, because what Rachel said next affected Diana too. Rachel said, "Furthermore, the IRS has already opened a preliminary inquiry into Mr. Whitfield's estate finances. Several of his business accounts which Mrs. Whitfield co-signed, may be subject to that investigation." Diana went pale. She was no longer the powerful widow in that room. She was a woman who might be liable for her dead husband's fraud. Her attorneys called for a recess. Margaret stood up in the gallery. She started to say something about me lying, about me manipulating her son. The judge gave her one warning. I looked at Margaret across that courtroom, and for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel small. I didn't need to explain myself or apologize or make her comfortable. I just looked right through her. In the hallway during the recess, Diana walked up to me alone. No lawyers. She looked exhausted. She said, "I knew he had someone. I didn't know it had gone on this long. I didn't know about any of the financial part." She paused. "He was gambling. Did you know that? Running up debts? I thought we had savings. We don't have anything close to what I thought we had." I said, "I didn't know either." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "We were both his victims. The difference is, you kept receipts." I said, "I'm an accountant. I always keep receipts." The case settled 4 months later. Based on my status as mortgage co-borrower and 8 years of documented financial contributions, rent equivalents, bill payments, caretaking, I was awarded 40% of the home's equity, just over $187,000, plus reimbursement for 5 years of shared household expenses. The life insurance policy paid out in full, $250,000, directly to me, outside the estate. There was nothing Diana could do about it, nothing Margaret could do, because Daniel had named me. And in the end, the one careless, lazy thing he'd forgotten to erase was the thing that protected me. During the legal proceedings, something else came out. Margaret had known about Diana since year 2. She had known everything. She had helped Daniel manage it, intercepting mail at her address, coaching the extended family on what not to say around me. The court issued a civil finding of conspiracy to conceal material information. Margaret faced her own legal consequences. She had her son's funeral. She did not get to escape. What came after? The cousins, the aunts, the extended Whitfield family who had looked through me for 8 years, they saw the court outcome published in the local records. Public. Permanent. They had protected Daniel's lie. Now they lived with their own names being attached to it. I did one more thing before I closed this chapter. I packaged Daniel's journals and sent them to Diana, not with a note that said I was sorry or a note that twisted the knife. Just the journals, because she deserved to know who he actually was. She deserved the truth that he had never given her either. She called me 2 days later. She cried. I let her. We didn't become friends, that wasn't the story, but we became something quieter and rarer than that. Two women who had survived the same lie and finally knew the truth. 6 months after the settlement, I signed the lease on a new apartment. 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms, east-facing windows. The morning light comes in strong and warm, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I painted the walls a color I picked entirely by myself. I bought furniture no one else had an opinion on. I adopted a dog, a 3-year-old golden retriever named Biscuit, who sleeps at the foot of my bed and has no idea how much he has healed me just by existing. I went back to work full-time. I started a small financial consultation practice on the side, specifically for women navigating divorce, separation, and financial fraud. Because of everything I went through, I knew exactly what questions to ask and what documents to demand. I became the person I had needed 8 years ago. And one day, I received a message I did not expect. It was from Marcus. He was 17 by then. He had somehow found me. His message was short and formal, like a teenager trying to write something beyond his years. It said, "I found out what my father put you through. I don't know if it helps to hear this, but I'm sorry. You deserved better than what he gave you." I read that message 3 times. Then I cried. Not the hollow kind this time, the kind that means something is finally truly done. I wrote back and told him it wasn't his burden to carry, that his father's choices belonged to his father, that I wished him well. I meant every word. People ask me sometimes, do I regret it? All of it. The 8 years, the love, the loss. And honestly, I regret trusting silence when my gut was screaming questions. I regret choosing politeness over my own protection. I regret letting someone else's comfort cost me my rights. But I don't regret who I was. I was a woman who loved fully and worked hard and gave everything she had. That was never the problem. The problem was a man who looked at that love and decided it was something he could use. The morning I signed the lease on my apartment, I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Outside the window, Columbus was waking up. Buses, pigeons, a neighbor walking her dog. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet. Not the quiet of a house where something is wrong and you can't name it. The quiet of a life that belongs entirely to you. I thought about Daniel. I thought about all his careful lies, all his managed silences, all the effort he put into making sure I never looked too close. And I thought he was keeping me a secret. But secrets have a way of becoming the whole story. And this one became mine.